Stranger Things was actually the first show I've ever reviewed on this channel. And yeah, those videos didn't do as great as my more recent ones, but the series still means a lot to me. So when they first announced the first spin-off, Stranger Things Tales from 85, I already knew I was going to check it out. For anyone who doesn't know, this is an animated spin-off that takes place between seasons 2 and 3 of the original Stranger Things show, following mainly the kids but in a completely different style. Now before we get into this, I want to make something clear. Ever since season 5 dropped, there's been a ton of backlash not towards this season, but the whole show and even its creators. So this spin-off was kinda set up to be diverse from the start. Some people were ready to hate it no matter what, and others were ready to love it just because it's more Stranger Things. As for me, I liked season 5. It definitely does have a lot of problems, but overall I thought it was pretty solid. But I'm not going to let that affect how I'm feeling about the show. I'm just judging Tales from 85 completely on its own. And with that said, I've got some pretty mixed feelings. Alright, let's start with the positives. One thing I actually liked was how the show connects back to the earlier seasons. Since it takes place between seasons 2 and 3, you get a lot of small references that the fans will pick up on. Stuff like early mentions of Starcourt Mall, or little callbacks to things that haven't fully happened yet. Nothing too crazy, but it's enough to feel somewhat connected. The soundtrack was also really good. If you know me, I'm a sucker for good soundtrack. Stranger Things has always had a strong track record when it comes to music. And this show keeps that going. You get some new tracks, but also a few reprises of older themes from the original series, which is a really nice touch. I also liked a lot of character interactions. That's something Stranger Things has always done well, and it still works here. Lucas and Max have some really nice moments together. Mike and Eleven also get a few good scenes, even if I do have some issues with Mike's character overall. I don't really like how Mike's character arc was kind of the same in season 3. This show takes place before season 3, so making him have the same character arc just makes his character in the 3rd season even more unlikable. And then there's the animation. When I first saw the trailer, I thought I was going to hate the animation. Seeing these characters go from live action to animation just doesn't feel right to me. I thought that there was no way that was going to work, but surprisingly, it actually did. The character models look good, the movement is smooth, and while it's not anything groundbreaking, it's definitely better than what I was expecting. So there's a decent amount of good things here, but this is where things start to fall a bit. First off, why is this show rated PG? Like seriously, how do you go from a later season of Stranger Things feeling borderline R-rated to this? The tone here is clearly aimed at a younger audience and it just doesn't fit. In the original show, these characters felt real, they swore, they argued, they acted like actual teenagers. But here, everything feels toned down. You've got Hopper literally stopping himself from swearing and saying stuff like, shirt. And it just feels wrong. It makes the characters feel less like themselves. Because of that, it's hard to take anything seriously, especially when it comes to the stakes. Since the show is canon between seasons of Stranger Things, we already know what happens to the characters. So no matter how big things get, there's no real tension. You know everyone's going to be fine, but what makes it worse is the scale of the show. The scale in this show is pretty huge, which raises a huge question. Why is none of this ever mentioned in season 3? And that's where the canon issue comes in. Because honestly, there's no way this fits into the original story. The way the characters act, the tone, the events, it just doesn't line up. So either it isn't canon, or it just doesn't make sense. And if it really isn't canon, then what's the point? Is it just more Stranger Things content? Because if that's the case, then yeah, this is where it starts to feel like the series is being stretched out a little too far. And I don't like saying that, I really don't, because I think new content can be great when it actually adds something. But this just feels like extra. And that's what worries me. Because this is how you end up with something like Star Wars, where there's so much content that it starts to lose what made it special in the first place. Stranger Things used to be such a unique show, but if it keeps going in this direction, that might not always be the case. So overall, Stranger Things Tales from 85 isn't a bad show. There are actually a lot of things here that works. The animation is better than expected, the soundtrack is great, and some of the character moments genuinely feel like classic Stranger Things. But at the same time, it just doesn't fully feel like it belongs. The tone is off, the stakes don't really matter, and the whole thing kinda sits in this weird space where it's not really for kids, but it's also not what fans of the original show are used to. And because of that, it ends up feeling less like an important addition to the story, and more like extra content that didn't really need to exist. So is it good or bad? Honestly, it's somewhere in the middle. If you're a big fan of Stranger Things, you'll probably find some stuff to enjoy here, but if you were hoping for something that really pushes the story forward, or adds something meaningful to the series, this probably isn't it. And that's why I'm so mixed on it, because it's not bad enough to hate, but it's also not good enough to justify it either.